Good evening and welcome to Stockton. For those who have been with us throughout the day, I trust it has been both productive and enjoyable. Our president, Dr. Herman Sottkamp, offers his sincerest regrets for not being here this evening. He's been in Washington representing Stockton on important business. However, we do have a special guest, and that's the First Lady of Stockton, Dot Sottkamp. So Dot, could you be recognized? Since our founding in 1971, Stockton has maintained a deep and unwavering commitment to environmentally supportive practices. It seems most appropriate, therefore, that just last week, as we were finalizing our planning for today's symposium, we were notified by the Princeton Review that Stockton has been named among the most environmentally responsible green colleges in the United States. Yeah, that's nice. Kudos. As an institution that has promoted academic excellence and the environment, there can be no greater pleasure for Stockton than to host the governor who exemplified these same traits his entire life. Most governors would love to be known as the education governor. New Jersey had but one, Tom Kean. Governor Kean has been devoted to education and public service his entire life. He has served as a teacher, a state legislator, the Speaker of the General Assembly, governor, president of Drew University, and chairman of the 9/11 Commission. Governor Kean last visited our campus in September 2010 when he described the work of the 9/11 Commission. Today, he reaches back in time, 25 years ago, when he signed New Jersey's Source Separation and Recycling Act. Joining him today is a former colleague who has been with him through a good portion of those days, Ken Lefevre. Ken served 3 terms in the New Jersey General Assembly from 1996 to 2002, where he represented the 2nd Legislative District. He served as the Assistant Majority Whip, the Majority Whip, Vice Chair of the Labor Committee, and was a member of several other committees. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Ken Lefevre.
When I first met this gentleman who I'm going to introduce, I did not wear glasses, so that's how far back it goes. As Harvey indicated, this gentleman was the president of Drew University in Madison, New Jersey from 1990 to 2005, chairman of the 9/11 Commission, as you already heard, and as well, governor, state of New Jersey from 1982 to 1990. Now, I was actually going to read to you from his bio, but it's in the program book, and I think you've all had an opportunity today to review it and peruse it, and it's quite impressive. The awards that this gentleman has received are just well-deserving, number one, but just over the top. But there are little chestnuts that I'd like to share with you before I introduce him to you. And as you heard, he was elected to his first term as governor in 1981 as the 48th governor of New Jersey, and then was elected to a second term in 1985 by the largest margin of victory in the history of New Jersey's gubernatorial races. I have to tell you the numbers. He won by 71% to 24%, which is a 47% gap or spread, unheard of. And I also have to tell you, that there are 567 municipalities in New Jersey, and he lost 3 of them. And still trying to figure out what happened to those 3. But in 1967, Governor Kean was first elected to the New Jersey Assembly, and in 1972, though he holds the unique distinction of having been elected Assembly Speaker as a Republican by a democratically controlled assembly. Believe it or not, it happened there in New Jersey. Also, during the 1976 presidential campaign, Governor Kane served as Gerald Ford's campaign manager for the state of New Jersey, and I served under the governor as his South Jersey coordinator. Also on board with me during the campaign was a small group of very inexperienced aides that the press dubbed as the Kiddie Corps. Now, I was anything but a kid then, but anyway, that's what they called us. But interesting enough, as inexperienced as we were, Jerry Ford might have lost the campaign to Jimmy Carter, but Ford carried New Jersey by 60,000 votes. And that was 36 years ago. Gosh, it's hard to believe. Lastly, how can we not mention Governor Kane's introduction in the spring of 1983 to the state's new ad campaign of New Jersey and You Perfect Together? I just happened to be wearing a New Jersey and You Perfect Together button, and it was a colossal success. I think there was no one that disagreed with the fact that it brought New Jersey back into a positive light. It made us a destination for foreign investment like no other state in this union. And I was proud to have served at that time as his Deputy Commissioner of Commerce. And we had folks like Brooke Shields, Bill Cosby served in some of these ads. And as I told the governor just a short while ago, you can go on YouTube and watch these ads if you want to see him and on the beach and Brooke Shields. And it's hard to believe what's on YouTube. It's, I don't know how they found their way there, but they're there. Also, it should be noted that the governor's son, Tom Jr., is mirroring his father's career, serving now as a state senator from the 21st District, as well as the Senate Republican leader. And I should mention to you that's not in the bio. The governor and his wife, Debbie, are the proud grandparents of 6 grandchildren. And congratulations. It was a pleasure for me to work for Tom, and it's been a pleasure to have had him as my friend for all these years, and it's a pleasure for me to introduce him to you now, Governor Thomas H. Kane.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And I have a surprise for him. I have a New Jersey and You Perfect Together coffee mug.
Wow.
That's actually
Those
a
are
collector's
great.
item.
It is. It is. Ken, thank you very much. I get a little bit nervous when somebody who's known you for this long introduces you, because there's all sorts of things he could have said, but you avoided the right ones, and I thank you for that. And to the First Lady, the Provost, and all of you who really understand and are doing so much to take recycling to the next level, to the next step, to make use of the technology and do things right. It was a different time in government then, Ken. I mean, in many ways, and Paul Cantilla remembers this, different time. Republicans and Democrats sort of got along with each other and did things together and shared the credit. And there were funny times too. I remember, Paul, I don't know if I ever told you this story, I remember once when I was doing a town meeting. I used to do town meetings. And this woman came up to me after the meeting and said, you know, people who work for you in state government are the rudest people I've ever known. I said, well, the governor doesn't like to hear that. So I said, what's that all about? And she said, well, I called motor vehicles. I thought, yeah, motor vehicles. Then I called motor vehicles, and just with a very simple complaint about what I had problems I've been having, and I said, got this man on the phone, and he was the rudest man I've ever talked to. He said he was just absolutely terrible, and he used language and everything else. And I said, well, I might as well see if we can help and straighten it out in any way we can. And I went back to the office, and I thought I'd try something. She'd given me I asked her for the number she'd called, and I had the number. So I dialed it. Those days you dialed. So, or I called it anyway. And this man answered the phone, and I said, I've got this problem with motor vehicles. And I gave him a problem that was very similar to the one the woman had given him. And I knew right away it was the same guy. He said, you know, you're wasting my time. said, I don't really have time to talk to people like you. It's very simple, very busy here, He went, and I understood what the woman was talking about. So I let him go on for a while, and I interrupted him, and I said, sir, do you know who this is? And he said, no. And I said, this is the governor. And there was silence on the phone for a minute. And then the man said, Governor, do you know who this is? And I said, no. And he hung up. Anyway, those are the days when we started working on recycling. And I thought of another story, more illustrative of the kind of problems we were having. Recycling, it was the time. As some of you here remember, it was the time. 40 years people had an idea that we should be recycling. And a long, long time. I mean, you had been working on it. And it was so logical. And yet it took so much time. And I was thinking of a similar story, and it's happened actually right off this coast here, and a long time ago. And it was one of those foggy nights that you get sometimes out here in the ocean, where the mist is rolling in. And there was a fellow on the ship, and he saw, as you see through the fog, he saw some lights blinking in the distance. And he said, that ship's heading right for us. So he got in the megaphone and yelled out through the thing, move 10 degrees to the right. And back through the fog came this voice, you move 10 degrees to the left. And it's fine, he said, I'm the captain, I'm talking to you, move 10 degrees to the right. Voice came back, you move 10 degrees to the left. And finally he said, sir, I'm on a battleship, move 10 degrees to the right. And his voice came back through the fog, sir, you better move 10 degrees to the left, I'm on a lighthouse. And, we were headed for the shoals in New Jersey in so very many ways. We really were. We were headed for the rocks before Paul Contillo and Art Albone and all those people with Hugh got together on this problem. Because so many things were happening at once, and so many things that had led us really to this particular point. Remember the time it was. I remember in the 70s we'd started encouraging people to recycle. And then in 1982 we had the Voluntary Recycling Act. Towns were again encouraged, and some of them did, to move toward recycling. But in the meantime, there were many more serious things happening out there. We had always just dumped everything in landfills. We were a throwaway society. Everything went in landfills. And that seemed to be fine for a long time. Everybody had their own landfill, in went the stuff. But they didn't do landfills the way they were supposed to. They didn't put the impervious member in the bottom of those landfills. And they dumped stuff through onto the landfills, and the stuff went right through into the soil. And as it went into the soil, it not only contaminated the soil, but it started in some cases to leak into drinking water. Now, when I came into office, among the other pleasant surprises I got were people who said, we've got more contaminated, what they call then, Superfund sites than anybody else in the country. And most of them were these sites. Most of them were these places where had been simply places where we had dumped our waste. They were landfills. And so we were faced with the problem of what do you do? Well, the first thing I said we had to do, when we were talking to the DEP commissioner, I said, if they're unsafe and they're going to contaminate waters and they're unsafe in neighborhoods, we got to close them down. And then we got to clean them up. Well, that's exactly what we started doing. We closed down landfills faster than anybody else in the country. In my first few years, if you can imagine, I shut down 100 of these landfills, 100 of them. And at one point, about in my third or fourth year, we were using more Superfund monies than any other state in the country, and at one point more than all the states combined in the country, because we matched the funds. There was a matching program. A lot of the other states were not willing to match the funds, so the funds were just sitting out there. So we grabbed every one. And we were cleaning up toxic waste sites all over the state, but these toxic waste sites were former landfills. So if you shut down 100 landfills, what's going to happen to the garbage? You know what people produce in this state, the tremendous amount of garbage that each individual produces. I remember at one point being told that, if you could fill up 9 giant stadiums with the amount of not toxic waste, but just waste that people were producing in this throwaway of society of ours. And so we tried all sorts of things. Now, Paul Cotillo, working with Art Albom and working with others, knew what they were doing. And they were running it through the legislature trying to see if they could get this recycling bill, but nobody had ever done it in the country before. Nobody had done it in the country before. And plus which, he was fighting a whole group of lobbyists who didn't want it. And so they were fighting. In the meantime, I was scrambling as governor. I mean, we had all these people who had municipal waste and didn't know now what to do with it. So we started mandating incinerators to try and get counties to build incinerators to burn it. We were taking stuff out of state all the time. We took so much garbage out of state, we got in the middle of a senatorial campaign in Ohio, where the guy said, if I'm elected, New Jersey's not going to dump in Ohio anymore. We were sending that much garbage Ohio's way. So all this was going on. We were scrambling to help the municipalities get rid of the waste, doing all these things. Paul thought Albom was working very hard in the legislature trying to get a bill through. Many of you were working in different communities and in state government to try and get it done, but it wasn't happening that fast. And then I think probably the thing that started to tilt it, I think, our way, Paul, you may agree with me, I don't know, but I think what probably started to tilt it our way was the fact that the cost started to go way up. So it wasn't anymore just an issue of taking it out of state or building incinerators. It was as you did that and people had to take their garbage further and further away, the price started to get up. And the price as it rose during the 80s, year after year after year, I remember being told at that point, if I got it right, that at one point it was costing municipalities 800 times more than it had in order to get rid of the garbage. Now, what did that mean? It meant, guess who pays? Property tax. Because it was counties and municipalities who had to get rid of the garbage. And freeholders, by the way, were taking some very courageous decisions. One of the first things that attracted me to a young woman freeholder in Somerset County was the fact she was taking bold, energetic, right moves to start recycling and getting rid of the garbage and building a center to get rid of it in Somerset County over a lot of open opposition. I remember calling her and telling her that, you're doing the right thing and you set an example for the state, and Christy Whitman said, thank you very much. First time I ever worked with Christy Whitman, and because of that, because of what she had done there and how impressed I was with her, I made her head of I brought her into my cabinet. And that was the beginning of a political career, but it was over. She started a political career and being particularly good on recycling. So this was what was happening. And as it started to happen, I suspect, Paul, you saw the bill starting to get some traction in the legislature because it was now a question of not only the right thing to do, it was a question on how much it was costing the taxpayers not to do it. But it still wasn't easy. These things, God bless good legislators, because these things aren't easy. I've been for a lot of things and fought for a lot of things with the environmental community, and they're wonderful people. but you start fighting with the environmental community, and the other side is a whole bunch of lobbyists with a lot of money, and it becomes very, very difficult. And that's what the sponsors of this bill were facing. And that's what they did, and that's what they were after. And so it was very, very tough. And then you finally started to break through. I'm not sure how it happened. I remember being delighted when I was told that your bill was really starting to move, and that there's a good chance it was going to get to my desk. And it was wonderful the day it did. I mean, it was a very, very exciting day. You've got the pictures of it, I guess, in the programs. I saw them again. I'm waving the bill over my head. Paul, you're one way. Art Album's on the other side. People from the department are there. And it was a very, very exciting day and a very, very exciting time. But it wasn't, again, it was never, ever easy. And, you know, but it was a day, but I must say, it was the first in the country, yes. New Jersey, under bipartisan leadership, because I never had a Republican legislature all 8 years. I never had one. When this went through, we had a Democratic Senate and a Republican House. That's why you had Paul and Art Album was the two sponsors. But it was always bipartisan. Under that bipartisan thing, New Jersey was first in so many ways. We were the only state who was mentioned twice in presidential State of the Nation addresses as being number one in education reform in the entire country. We were the first state, you know, to divest of any investments in the country of South Africa, as long as they were going to discriminate with apartheid. We were the first state to move in a number of issues on higher education. We were the first state to do so many things. We were number one. First bill, first transportation trust fund, first, you know, I could go on and on and on and on. So New Jersey was feeling pretty good about it. So if we were one of 3 states with a AAA bond rating, think about that. We were one of the 3 most responsible fiscal states in the country by Standard & Poor's and Moody's and all of that. It's a different time. But so we were feeling good. So we didn't have any problem being number one. It was tough. It was tough because what Paul had to do, you know, you have to run for re-election. He was going to tell everybody what to do. And you had to separate in your home. It's not easy ever to tell people what they have to do in a democratic society. And yet that's, of course, what we did because it was right. And there was money in the bill for education, and I think we convinced people in the state that it was right. I found what I said on that day when we were all together in the file. And I quoted, I got it right here, Paul, I'm the same as you, you know, the public service has driven us blind. But I quoted the great naturalist John Muir, and what Muir said is, any fool can destroy trees. After all, they can't run and hide. So I pointed out that by passing this piece of legislation, we'll not only save trees, but so many other of our precious natural resources. And by this act, I said, we are showing a rare wisdom. We take a step toward fulfilling God's law as contained in the book of Ecclesiastes. And I quoted one of my favorite quotes, because I think, you know, I'm always looking for places where people talk about the environment and talk about commands, how we should husband our resources. And I think this is one of the best. It comes from Solomon, book of Ecclesiastes, that one generation passeth away, and another generation cometh, but the earth abideth forever. And with that quote, I signed the bill. And we had the first state recycling bill in the entire country. And I just, But I'll say now, as I think I said then, wasn't my bill. I supported it, I signed it, I thought it was the right thing to do, but it was Paul Contillo's bill. And I want to thank him, and Art Albaum's daughter is here. Art was a wonderful, wonderful sponsor of it from the Assembly. But also I want to thank the people then who were in Department of Environmental Protection, who worked so hard for it, the people from the recycling community, the people from the counties. This was a coalition which came together. And without that coalition, it just simply wouldn't have happened. And it shows something. It shows that even when it's difficult, and this poll took you a good many years before you got this going, even if it's difficult, good people working together from government, from the environmental community, from outside of government, doing it in a bipartisan fashion, can get things done. So thank you very, very much for inviting me here tonight. I wish people in Washington would heed that lesson. Thank you very much.